Okay, this is a continuation of going through Sky Sports' F1 show special video that they produced a month after Abu Dhabi. They produced it specifically to try to validate it and to get fans to accept it. Now, I've done 4 parts of this already, and these are the 4 thumbnails. I didn't create a thumbnail, it's just the ones that were generated by YouTube. So there are parts 1 to 4. Part 4, I would love to see more people view that because it's something that's really important. Part 4 has got a lot of important stuff in it, but only 184 views. So please take the time to have a look at part 4. But I'm going to pick up from where part 4 concludes and take you through what they were then continuing to talk about. So initially they had 4 people, which was Lazenby anchoring it, Brundle, Damon Hill and Johnny Herbert. And as the programme goes through, they introduce Ted Kravitz, Crofty, they bring in Karun Chandok, Anthony Davidson, Craig Slater, Rachel Brooks. So they bring in pretty much the whole complement of the Sky Sports F1 crew to try to provide validation. They are pretending they're having this discussion, this debate about it, but the underlying narrative that they drive it to is this narrative of acceptance, and they do not identify the problems, and they don't identify the crux of the problems. And what they do, they gaslight you to try to shift blame or point you to think, oh, this is the problem, oh, this is the problem. It's not at all. It absolutely isn't. But we'll go through this bit and you'll soon see some of these elements. So we're starting from 21 minutes 40. So if you want to go and watch that original video, go watch that through and then see what I'm saying about breaking down what it is they are saying. So this is Brundle.
For years, decades, I heard, Formula One's boring. You know, I watch the pre-race, the first lap or two, and I go back and see what happens at the end. You know, there is an element, just like with 2020 cricket or with other sports, of energizing your sport and trying to put on the best show that you can. So I agree with Damon. You know, if we've already got an override.
Okay, before he goes on to agreement with Damon, this notion of energizing the sport, dealing with Abu Dhabi as if validating it, saying, oh, well, it's okay because I can see that Formula One wanted to energise the sport. Well, if you want to produce a version of the sport which you think is going to be more entertaining to fans, what you do, you create that sport. You set the parameters for it, you set the rules for it. You don't change a sport midway through that sport. The example I gave in the last video is with 2020 cricket, when they introduced the notion of 20 over cricket, they didn't halfway through a 50 over game say, well, 20 overs into one side's innings in a 50 over game, say, oh, actually, we're just going to make this a 20 over game now, even though the team that's batting, you approach this game as if it was a 50 over game, so therefore you tried not to lose wickets in the first 20 overs and just tried to build an innings so that you still have wickets there left at the end and could accumulate a total of 300 by the end of your 50 overs. So you've not gone hell for leather in the first 20. But we've got to the 20 over point now, so we're just going to cut your innings short and just put the other team into bat and we'll see how many they score in 20 overs. It's skewed everything. It's completely skewed everything. So if one team scored 100, batting, trying to bat for the duration of 50 overs, but then getting their innings cut short after just 20 of those, and then the other team's like, right, all you've got to do now is outscore them in 20 overs. The other team takes a completely different approach. So you don't change the rules mid-event. So Brundle trying to say, compare this to other sports energising their sport. It is a completely absurd suggestion, but this is what happens throughout the entire programme. They're choosing to throw in suggestions all of the time, none of which are valid. But by doing so, they're getting the viewer to think, oh, what I think about this? They could have done that. think about this, think about that, none of it is relevant. And several of these points that they throw in, they are then points that get argued about in the comment section of social media, keeping F1 social media trending, making them money. They never once get to the crux of the matter. Anyway, we'll carry on.
Not written in the regulations. Let's try not to have a race finish under the safety car and the red flag. You can either look at that as eminently sensible or show business.
Okay, I want to replay that because this is what he's doing. It's a crime, and he is proposing that you can either look at that as sensible or show business. Or, Martin, you could look at it as a crime. You can look at it as sport manipulation. So, this notion, an overrider. There's nothing to do with an overrider, okay? As I've mentioned numerous times before, you cannot have two teams in a sporting event contrive an outcome. That's called match fixing. You cannot have the governing body of a sport propose that it would like the sporting finale to end in a certain way. As I've said before, you cannot allow FIFA, for example, to say, we would like the World Cup final to be settled with a penalty shootout. Well, if that doesn't happen organically and you break the rules to achieve that desire, you're manipulating it. And you're doing it fraudulently because that's not in accordance with the rules of the sport. People bet on the sport. People invest their time, their emotion, their money into sport because it's what it is. It's not to be manipulated like that. It's fraudulent. But let's see if I've got back to the part where Brundle starts this.
First lap or two, and I go back and see what happens at the end. There is an element, just like with 2020 cricket or with other sports, of energizing your sport and trying to put on the best show that you can. So I agree with Damon. If we've already got an overrider not written in the regulations, let's try not to have a race finish under the safety car and the red flag. You can either look at that as eminently sensible or show business.
If we've already got an overrider, no, there's no such thing. This notion of we would prefer for races to end as a race not behind the safety car. Okay, fine. Yes, it turns the race into a bit of a damp squib when you've got 5 laps remaining and you think, is there a chance of there being a change of position in those last 5 laps? Realistically, the way things were going, the answer was no. One car being 12 seconds up the road ahead of the other one, with 3 lapped cars in between the two as well, and them lapping at similar speeds, there didn't look to be any chance of the second place car catching the first place car. That's the reality of the situation. But then if we get something that means that racing is neutralised and there's not enough time left to restart the race, well, so be it. That's the nature of the sport. Now what you've done, you've changed the rules of the sport. You've ignored the regulations which need to be carried out to ensure that if racing resumes in a fair manner for all competitors. You've ignored that altogether, and you've just set it up for one to win because you've done that. The team that was out the front was judging its strategy based on the situation, knowing what the regulations were and what the situation was. You look at that situation, 5.4 laps remaining. These incidents take about 5.5 laps of time out of the race. So therefore, with a high percentage that this is going to be a safety car finish. Therefore, you do not pit and risk losing track position. So the other team, well, they were able to pit and not lose track position. So why not? Because on the off chance that there was a restart, well, that would be beneficial to you. But realistically, it's not possible to restart. You can't then restart it having ignored the procedures that you need to do. You just can't do that because you fixed it. That's what it does. It fixes it. And this notion of this overrider, it's not an overrider at all. If it's not possible, it's not possible. You can't break the rules to facilitate it. The rules were broken to facilitate it. That's cheating. That's fraud. Okay, the reason it's fraud is because of all the parties that are involved. Had it have just been a mistake, you can rectify a mistake. But it's the fact that F1 TV created that narrative, setting it up for a last lap race before it even happened. It's the fact that Brundle and Crofty were lying about the rules of the sport, pretending to you all that there were various options whereby that race could restart. And when we get through to Karun Chandok, he's still lying about them options. Not possible. Even a month on, they're lying still. Totally lying. You've then got the rule break, but then you've got an appeal process whereby you can reverse that, which they didn't reverse, which Toto Wolff did not appeal, even though he says in a court of law they would have won. And then the FIA themselves didn't reverse it. That's fraudulent. That is contriving an outcome that you wanted that you're not going to then reverse. That's a fraud.
But either way, I think I would support it.
Martin Brundle would support a fraud. Okay? You can. His version was, it's either, what was it? Something like Showbiz, or what was his other thing? But he'd support it.
And the red flag. You can either look at that as eminently sensible, or
eminently sensible to have this overrider of a racing finish. No. Okay, as I've said before, a Formula One race is very much like a marathon. It's contested over 190 miles. If one car is way out in the lead and racing has to be neutralised, then what do? Do you let everybody catch him and then just go, actually, all that advantage that you just built up, okay, although you were a mile up the road from the next competitor, all that advantage you've built up, we're going to wipe that out and we're just going to turn it into a 100-metre sprint now? Well, that might not be that guy's forte. That might not be where his talents lie. So all that work that he'd put in for the duration of the event, it's wiped out. That's not what that sport is it? Now that's the way the regulations work in Formula One when it comes to safety car situations. But if those regulations mean that it's going to result in a safety car finish, that's what it is as well.
Show business. But either way, I think I would support it.
Okay. Talk about show business. And show business would have been a red flag, because then you...
Well, that would have been show business as well, Johnny, but it still wouldn't have been appropriate.
Would have had the fairness of having that last lap sort of battle, or last couple of laps, whatever it had been, when they would have been on very similar tyres. Then you would have had sort of that last sort of hurrah. So that would have worked out perfectly.
Okay, they're all still validating the last hurrah, okay? Look back through the history of the sport as to when they throw a red flag. What are the sorts of incidents that they will throw the red flag at? It wasn't the sort of incident that Nicholas Latifi's crash was. Simple as that. There's always a reason why you would stop a race with a red flag. And it's not a crash like Nicholas Latifi's is not the sort of incident they'd throw a red flag at. So why they keep proposing that as being, oh, they that was a possibility open to them, they could have done that, that would have been better. No. Just no.
For the show.
We throw a red flag, do we then? Every time there's an incident, 5, 6, 7, or is it 10? Or is it 3 laps before the end of a Grand Prix?
So see what they're doing here. So they propose the notion of a red flag, and then they counter the notion of a red flag. We'll throw an option out there, and then we'll say that's not the right option, but maybe that's something you should decide in the comments section. No, fuck your comment section, right? It's not applicable. Look at all the situations where a red flag is applicable. That wasn't one of them. Simple as that. Just wasn't one of them. End of story. Cut that one loose. That one doesn't apply. Wipe it off the table. But they don't do that.
We automatically throw a red flag, do we?
That's a very good idea, Martin, to be honest.
Very good idea, Martin. See what they do. This is this little circle jerk that they've got going on here, where they're always, well, we'll throw this option in there and we'll debate this and we'll discuss this and we'll see what you think. It's not about what you think. It's not about what anybody thinks. It's about what is. Binary facts here. Is that a red flag situation? No, it's not. Okay, it doesn't meet the criteria. Don't even start talking about it. Okay, just dismiss the notion.
I mean, it gets us out of that sticky problem. But there was two solutions to the problem. There was three. The third one was letting the race finish under a safety car, which I think that Makumasi was desperate, and everyone was trying to persuade him we don't want to have happen.
Okay, so everybody was trying to persuade the official to create a certain outcome. Wow, that's result manipulation. That's a fraud. Okay, that's your saying. Oh, well, the third option, this option of it being a safety car finish, which is what it had to be. You're saying, oh, they were desperate to persuade him that wasn't to not do that. Well, that in itself is clear evidence of manipulating an outcome of a sport. Doesn't get any clearer than that, does it? That's guilt. There you are. You are guilty of fraud.
The other two options were you don't let the cars unlap themselves.
Oh, you're not allowed to restart like that, Damon. When did they restart like that since 2012? Since 2012, when did they restart like that? But they didn't. There was one, I think it was Singapore, where their line was a lapped car, pitted late in the safety car period, meaning that I don't think he qualified to unlap. The other one was when they gave the notification for a car to unlap, and he didn't. Whether his radio communications were broken or not, the fact is the FIA carried out their procedure. Whiting told the guy, now you need to unlap, and he just didn't go. He just stayed there for a bit. So after about a lap, they went, well, you've been given the opportunity, you've not gone, we're going to get going now. Now you're just going to have to get out of the way. But that's his own fault. That's the driver's own fault, or the team's own fault, for not getting that message through to the driver. And it just might have been unfortunate that the communications weren't working that caused that. Every other time the procedure's carried out for a reason. Carried out for a reason. So you can't leave him in situ. I keep telling you, you can't leave Lando Norris now a lap behind Pierre Gasly, when previously Norris was closer to Gasly than Verstappen was to Hamilton. There you go.
And you maybe get one lap in, or you stop the race and have the one lap.
No, stopping the race is not a valid decision. You can only throw a red flag under certain circumstances. Doing it for drama is not applicable.
Race like we had in Baku. So that wasn't...
Again, Baku, there was a reason on the grounds of safety. There wasn't a reason on the grounds of safety to do that at Abu Dhabi.
The choice that he took, and he took...
And also, it was a direct... He contradicted what happened a year ago. There's a lot of people talking about the Eiffel Grand Prix in 2020 when he was defending himself about the safety car staying out for a longer period. And he actually said it's because all of the lap cars need to unlap themselves. Let's just go back quickly, if I could, to the articles in question, 48.12. And these were...
You can go back before these, 48.08 or 48.9, something like that. Those will show you what the safety car regulations are when cars haven't been lapped, and they state that once it's a safety car situation, once the race director deems that incident needs to be dealt with using a safety car, then that safety car, once deployed, needs to remain on track at least until the leader is behind it and all of the other cars are bunched up behind the leader. Okay, so what that does, it neutralises the race, and all of the advantages that have been previously built up get wiped out. We then bring it down to this 48.12, which is whereby that same situation, If if the leader has started lapping some of the cars, then you need to carry out this procedure, because that restores, in effect, that condition that I've just described, whereby the leader is behind the safety car and all of the other cars are caught up behind him in the right race order. All of the advantages that have been previously built up had been nullified, wiped out, and then we go racing again from that, effectively that zero position. That's what these are for. But listen to how we talk through these.
The ones that were protested, if you like, and then they didn't follow through their appeal, and we'll come on to that in a minute from Mercedes. 48.12, any cars that have been lapped by the leader will be required to pass the cars on the lead lap and the safety car. Obviously, Red Bull questioning that any doesn't mean all.
Okay, so they're focused on that any cars that have been lapped by the leader will be. Okay, so you focus on the Red Bull claiming that any doesn't mean all. Why don't you focus on the word required? Okay, any car that's been lapped is required. Okay, if you're required to do something, that means you have to do something. You can't pick and choose who has to do it. If you meet the condition that you've been lapped, you have to pass the cars on the lead lap, right? Required. But you focused on the word any because that's the Red Bull word. That's the Red Bull bullshit argument. Okay? It then shows you here which are the qualifying cars for that, which says only applies to cars that were lapped at the time they crossed the line at the end of the lap during which they crossed the first safety car line for the second time. Okay? And then it says, having overtaken the cars on the lead lap and the safety car, these cars should then proceed around the track at an appropriate speed without overtaking and make every effort to take up position at the back of the line of cars behind the safety car. The purpose of it. Okay, it says that in the regulations. That's the aim of these regulations, so that those released cars take up position at the back of that safety car snake. Okay? When they're overtaking and being released, they've got to stay on the racing line unless deviating from it is unavoidable. Okay, unless the clerk of the course considers the presence of the safety car is still necessary. Once the last lapped car has passed the leader, the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap. That's the important thing there, isn't it? Once you've released those lapped cars, all of them, okay, the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap. Had that have been carried out, Lewis Hamilton would be the winner. Absolutely, there's no argument about it. And if you look down here, it says if the clerk of the course considers track conditions are unsuitable for overtaking, the message "overtaking will not be permitted" will be sent to all competitors via the official messaging system. So, on lap 56, when you saw that message, lapped cars will not be allowed to overtake, well, it's not lapped cars will not be allowed to overtake. It's called overtaking will not be permitted. This is what I keep talking about. Lapped cars will not be allowed to overtake is not an official message. It doesn't appear here. It doesn't appear in these safety car regulations. They made that up. Right? But there was a reason why overtaking will not be permitted, and that was because at that stage, the clerk of the course considered that track conditions were unsuitable. That being, there were men on the track, there were marshals on the track, still clearing up debris, and he didn't want lapped cars being released and flying around at high speed, because they would be travelling at high speed around there, kind of trying to catch the back of the pack, right? Didn't want them coming by turn 14 when there were still men on the track. Hence, they could not release the lapped cars at that stage. It was only when they were on lap 57 that they were confident that that track was now clear and it was safe and they could carry out the procedure. So you release them on lap 57, the safety car stays out and returns to the pits at the end of lap 58. It's a safety car finish.
And Mercedes saying that wasn't applied fully. Then you go on to 48.13, safety car.
And Mercedes saying it wasn't applied fully. Why are you saying Mercedes saying? Was it applied fully? Yes or no? You can categorically state that that was not applied fully. Everybody in the whole world can say that was not applied fully. But you, Sky Sports F1, have to go. And Mercedes argue, Mercedes say they don't think it was applied fully. It clearly wasn't. It clearly wasn't.
Car in this lap overrides Article 48.12. You've also got to look at
No, it doesn't override. Okay, none of those regulations override the previous one. There are a sequence of regulations, a sequence of events. You do this, you do this, you do this, and you do this. You can't jump them, okay? And one doesn't override the other. It's once this has been carried out, then you do the next one. Once this has been carried out, then you do the next one. Okay, that's the way it works.
Article 15.3, which allows the race director to control the use of the safety car.
And this is a completely invalid interpretation. In order for them to have dreamt this up, you do not dream this up on the fly. Okay? You do not dream this up on the fly. You do not, on lap 56 of that race, when you could look at turn 14, realise that there were marshals on the track, realise that you couldn't unlap the lapped cars on lap 56, meaning that it was going to be a safety car finish. You do not then go to the sporting regulations, go through the safety car procedures, then go back to 15.3 and make a concoction of those, and then get on the radio to Michael Massey and go, Michael, we've looked through the regulations and we think that any doesn't mean all, and we think 48.13 overrides 48.12, and we also think that if you use your overriding authority, which is 15.3, then you can contrive the end of the race to make sure it can be set up for max, right? That doesn't happen. Okay, you show me a sport where, as that sport is being played out, the teams, the managers of that team, the bench, they're getting the rule book out and going, all right, how can we try to use these rules to convince the referee that he can do something different within these rules? Doesn't happen, does it? So somebody had to contrive this beforehand. Somebody had to propose these notions beforehand as their validation for how they were going to do it. That's the actual truth of it. That is the truth of it. Some will argue otherwise. Some will go, oh, you've got no proof of this. Just work it through. Do you really think that, having witnessed what we saw, having seen that this so-called human error by Michael Massey, and in creating that last lap, right? Do you think that, oh, he's made that error, but now let's see if we can go and have a look at the rules and see if we can twist these rules so to somehow make it seem that that error is actually okay? Oh, it turns out that in the rules, if we say that 48.13 overrides 48.12, any doesn't mean all, and also when we go back to 15.3, he's got overriding authority, it turns out that we can create this argument that makes it seem that Massey was within his rights to do that. Really? That's convenient, isn't it? That's very convenient. It's not how it happened. Because they're all fake arguments. I've already destroyed each of the Red Bull arguments. They're fake. They do not apply. They're fictitious. When you follow through what they produce, they are completely wrong. And yet the FIA went, oh yes, we agree with you, Red Bull. We think despite this being the 199th Grand Prix contested under these regulations being like they are now, we think, and this is the first time it's been proposed that they could be interpreted that way, We think you're right, Red Bull. That's the nature of this.
You can look at that in different contexts.
No, you can't, Lazenby, but what you're doing is, once again, validating. That's what you're paid to do. You're just this talking head paid to validate.
The all-powerful race director.
No. Is it an all-powerful referee in football? Is it an all-powerful chair umpire in tennis? Is it an all-powerful, I don't know, umpire in cricket? No. They're there to oversee the sport and make decisions in accordance with the rules of the sport. It's the same in Formula One. Don't try and dress Formula One up to be something that the race director can determine exactly what's going to happen. No, it's all within parameters. That's the nature of sport.
Race dictator, if you want to call him that. But
let's all make light of it. Again, little circle jerk. We'll all propose the notion of the race dictator, and we'll discuss this, and we'll let me know what you think in the comments section kind of attitude. Because this is what they want you to do. They want the conflict. They create the conflict by introducing these notions rather than clearly saying, this isn't allowed, this is wrong, this isn't allowed. You can go through the list of these things. This isn't allowed, this isn't allowed, this isn't allowed, this isn't allowed. This is what took place and it's not allowed. This is what took place and it's not allowed. This is what took place and it's not allowed. All of this is wrong. But they don't do it, do they? They don't do it. Why is that? Because you're fake. Because you're paid to present the fraud. You're criminals. You're part of the fraud.
With regards to the application of rules, it is consistency, isn't it, Martin, that we need here? And the evidence is that we got something that was completely the opposite of what we saw a year ago.
We want consistency, but the evidence is we got something that's not. So it's wrong then, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't freestyle the regulation.
You can't freestyle the regulations, Martin. Martin was telling us real time during that race that you don't have to let the lap cars through. It's not mandatory in the regulations, I don't think. I don't think it's mandatory in the regulations, Martin. That's what you kept telling everybody. But that's normally on a wet day, you tell us. Is there any mention of a wet day in those regulations, Martin? Or are you just freestyling the regulations by saying that, Martin? Lying to people ahead of it. And how long will they wait, Martin? You know, it says then, once the last lapped car has been past the leader in the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap. But rather than you be able to tell everybody that real time, Martin, you'd ask us the question, how long will they wait? You know, and you do that 3 times. And you're telling us, oh, you can't freestyle the regulations. But you relate that to your commentary. That's not congruent, is it, Martin?
Because teams are working their strategies out, and whether they pit or not, of course, on what they understand to be the rules.
From what they understand to be. What do you mean? Teams are working their strategy out as to what they understand to be the rules. Why don't you say in accordance with the rules? With what the rules are. Not what they understand to be the rules. Because the rules are the rules. It's not, oh, I didn't understand that they were the rules. You try that. You try driving down the motorway at 100 miles an hour and getting pulled over by the police. Oh, my understanding was something different. I didn't understand that the speed limit was 70 miles an hour. Okay, that's fine then. That's fine. We'll make a TV programme, we'll get these 4 to validate it, and you'll be fine. You'll get off with it. Not a problem. Be no penalty. No penalty. You won't get a fine or banned or points on your licence or anything like that. It's just because you didn't understand, did you? That's fine.
And there's no doubt about it. They need to be much more rigid in that respect.
How long will they wait? But they don't have to let the lap cars through. I don't think it's mandatory in the regulations. But that's normally on a wet day. What? It sounded quite flexible there, Martin. Sounded quite flexible.
And you're absolutely right.
The final thing is, I suppose these rules were written a long time ago by Charles.
Oh, they were written a long time ago. That's the reason as well, isn't it, Lazenby? They were written a long time ago. That's one of the reasons to validate that they've now been broken. Yeah, we broke the rules because, yeah, they were written so long ago, weren't they? Yeah. And nobody knows what they are or what they're for because we've been using them for 199 Grand Prix and nobody understands them.
Charlie himself, weren't they? Do they need a rewrite? Come back to you, Martin, on that.
Well, I've always felt that lapped cars, for example, is a flawed regulation. They should drop to the back of the crocodile.
No, Martin, it's a flawed description that you're now giving. Totally flawed logic. Okay, so what you think in the comments section, Martin Brundle, is absolute bollocks. Absolute bollocks. I've always thought that the lapped cars should drop to the back. Well, what does that result in? Let's consider Lando Norris and Pierre Gasly. Lando Norris, after Sergio Perez retired from third position, the mysterious Red Bull retirement, it promoted Gasly to 6th, Norris to 7th. So, at the point of the crash, Norris was only 12 seconds behind Gasly, right, with 5 laps to go. Norris was on pretty fresh tyres as well, because he'd got a puncture and by going over the curbs, if you remember that. So, what you're saying is, because Lewis Hamilton has come round and passed Norris, but he hasn't made it as far as Gasly yet, now there's a safety incident where Latifi's crashed. Now we just say, Norris, unlucky, you've now got to drop to the back. Well, Pierre Gasly's made it all the way round, and once Norris drops to the back, well, he's now an entire lap behind him, isn't he? He'd have to pass him and go all the way around the track, catch an entire lap, a minute 30 seconds behind. No, that's not how it is it? You've artificially impacted his race due to a safety incident. It's a ridiculous notion, Brundle, absolutely ridiculous. And as we've seen numerous times before, there are people who have been lapped that they've then benefited from this procedure because it's a known procedure, and they've gone on to get podium positions or point scoring positions in a Grand Prix. It's what it is, and it's fair. It's something that has been written out intending to be fair to all competitors. If the gap between first and second gets reduced from 12 seconds to nothing, then why should it be that the gap between 6th and 7th isn't reduced to nothing as well? Just because the lead car has managed to make it around the track and have got past 7th but not yet made it past 6th. Doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that. But you propose this ridiculous notion numerous times.
But you know that it's so complicated. What is a lapped car exactly?
I'll tell you, Martin. A lapped car is a car that the leader has made it past. Okay? Simple as that, isn't it? So at that stage on the track, you could see that Lando Norris at that stage in time was in 8th position. Lewis Hamilton, the leader, had made it around the track and come by Norris. Means Norris is lapped. Any car that is further down the road than Norris, so in 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th position, the leader clearly would have passed them too. They are also lapped. See, it's quite simple, isn't it? Look at how he tries to confuse the issue now.
Exactly, because if that car pits, or if indeed the leader pits, and several drivers become unlapped at that point, depending on the stage of the race.
Did the leader pit, Martin? No. Okay, so that example is irrelevant. Okay, the leader didn't pit, so none of the cars that he had previously passed then became unlapped. What did happen was, if you remember, at the time of the Latifi crash, there were just 3 lapped cars between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. When Max Verstappen went into the pits, Red Bull playing their clever cards, what actually happened was that two of the cars that Max had lapped, the second place car had lapped, okay, which were Charles Leclerc and, let me think who it was. Yeah, Charles Leclerc and Sebastian Vettel. They were the last two, because those 5 cars were Norris, Alonso, Ocon, Leclerc, Vettel. So it was Leclerc and Vettel stayed out on track and unlapped themselves effectively. Okay, went back past Verstappen when Verstappen was pitting for those fresh softs. You know, but we get told that Red Bull played some clever cards. We get the lie of being able to restart that race with lapped cars in situ. Okay, well, that's not possible. Okay, but these clever cards were that you had all the cars are bunched up. You had 3 cars between you and the leader. Oh, let's go racing like that. Well, number one, you can't, right? But their clever pit strategy of pitting him and the other cars staying out on track now meant there's 5 cars between him and the leader. Really clever card. See these little stories, they don't add up, do they? You can pick holes in every single one of them. Okay, and this is the thing with truth. You can't make this many bullshit and you can't pick holes in so many things as you can with all of the fake description that they give you with all the lies that they've told. That's the true nature of it.
So until they've crossed the first safety car line twice, we don't even define who is lapped and who isn't lapped.
Okay, not a problem, is it? It's not difficult though, is it? Once they've crossed the safety car line twice, that's when they define it. So what that then means is, if you then become lapped after that point in time, you're not eligible to unlap. And you will see that after about 2, maybe 3 laps of lapping behind the safety car, Pierre Gasly goes into the pits. He's well ahead of the safety car then, so he can get in and out of the pits ahead of that safety car. Because had he have gone into the pits to change tyres and the safety car and some of the competitors had gone by him, he would have became lapped, even though Lewis Hamilton hadn't lapped him at the time of the Latifi incident. All right, but in doing so, if that had have happened after they'd have crossed the safety car line for the second time, you're no longer eligible to unlap. Hence, teams try to make sure that within their strategy, they don't pit a driver in that manner.
Really complex system.
It really isn't, Martin. It really isn't. And it's easy to explain to people. It's easy to make people understand exactly what it is. But instead of doing that, you just say, oh, it's really complex. Do you know what? Let's have teachers in schools that they've got a class full of pupils and they just go, oh, yeah, this that I need to teach you. I'm sorry, you just won't get it. It's just too complex. It's a minefield. Nobody can understand it. You're the expert, Martin, and it's too complicated for you, isn't it? So you're not really the expert, are you? Or you're just lying to promote validation.
But at that point, instead of elongating the safety car period by...
It's not elongating it, Martin. It's just what it is.
Letting them pass and go, they should fall back in order to the back of the pack and get going.
Wrong. For all the reasons I've explained. Right. I'm mindful of the time. These always take a long time. We're up to about 25 minutes, 43 seconds. So that'll do for this one. See you soon.